Wow, we have a big day today on my show. We have a Hollywood legend, I would say, because you've done a lot of work, but one of the things that really, I know you most from is working with Elvis Presley and being the leading lady with Elvis. How did your career start, Cynthia Pepper?
Well, my folks were in business. My daddy was in vaudeville and went overseas with Bob Hope, and my mother was a Ziegfeld dancer, and it's just in my blood. So my daddy was married to Ginger Rogers. That's
no kidding.
It has nothing to do with me. I just think it's cool, So I grew up in the business, and then I'll tell you how I got and I did other things. My three sons, Adam's Family, Perry Mason, a lot of the 60s. And I had my own show called Margie on ABC.
Yeah.
When I had pigtails. And that's the title of my book is Pigtails, Presley, and Pepper, 3 Ps. And it's a show business book, not just necessarily about Elvis. But I got the Elvis part. And I grew up in Hollywood, so I was a big fan of Elvis. I went, oh, Elvis. I got a call from my agent and said, are you sitting down? And I said, well, I will. He said, well, Elvis's people called me, because I'm your agent, and said, you might be right for this part, called Midge Riley in a movie they're doing called Kissing Cousins. Okay. And he said, so what you have to do is you go to MGM. We lived in West Hollywood at the time. Go to MGM Studios, go to the wardrobe department, and if you can fit the uniform, wear the uniform, you start co-starring with Elvis on Monday, and that's exactly what happened.
No kidding.
Oh, I was so, well, I mean, usually you audition, and when I did Margie, they said there were 200 girls vying for it, and it took place in the 20s. I was a high school girl in the 20s, and then it took auditions and readings and all that kind of thing. This was just like this. So it was fate.
So what was your first day of meeting Elvis like, or how did you meet Elvis?
I met him. I was in the dressing room. We all had dressing rooms, and there were roses on the table that said, to Cynthia, love EP. Elvis has a crush on. No, he did that with all his leading ladies. Anyway, I came down, knocked on the door. I came down the stairs, and there was the assistant director. I said, Elvis, this is Cynthia Pepper. She's playing Midge Riley. And I went to shake his hand, and he said, no, honey, give me a big old hug. And that was it.
No kidding.
I melted, And he was so professional, and I had done a lot of work before that, so that I could still be a professional.
Yeah, but this is
goofy,
Elvis. People say when they met Elvis, they fall in love right away. What was your feeling like?
My feeling was we got to know each other, and he sang a love song to me called Tender Feelings, which is an old Shenandoah song. And I'm supposed to not like him in the film. He played 2 cousins, one country and one military. So I played a military woman. So I ended up with the country Elvis, the blonde Elvis, so to speak. And he was singing to me around the Jeep, and I went, oh, I don't like you, And of course I wanted to go forward, but I couldn't. And he sang to me, and then one thing led to another, and I flip him and so forth. He chases me, and then we kiss, and that was heaven. What can I say?
I'll bet it was.
I liked it so much I kept messing it up.
Really?
Do it again.
Now, you also had a distinction because this wasn't a movie filmed on the lot. This was, well, at least from what I know, he was up in location in Big Bear, right?
Big Bear was supposed to be the Big Smoky Mountains. We filmed there, I think, 2 weeks, and then MGM Studios, or 1 week, and then 2 weeks at MGM. It was fast. Being
isolated like that, did you guys spend any time together more than normal, or?
Yeah, talking and everything, and we had many conversations. I found him to be quite humble, quite insecure.
As far as what, his acting or his looks, or
just him?
Oh, just in general.
He said to me when we filmed the singing part. I mean, he was right up to here, and I thought, I can't believe Elvis Presley is singing to me, and I'm getting paid for it. But he said, Cynthia, and I said, what? He said, I don't know what I'm doing, making all these films. And I said, what do you mean, Elvis? He said, I feel I should be back home driving a truck. And what do you say to that? That's where his mind was. He's still a country boy, but when he was Elvis on stage, he was Elvis, and he was so professional, and he didn't think the fans would remember. He said to many people, do you think the fans will remember me when I'm gone? I said, of course, Elvis. Well, who knew,
Yeah.
He's bigger now than ever.
Yeah, maybe the biggest pop star of all time? Potentially.
I would think so. I go to many festivals, and I all over the world because of Elvis. I've been to Australia, Ireland, Denmark, been to Denmark twice, Canada, England, because of Elvis and talk about Elvis. Because there's not many of us left that
Yeah.
worked with him,
Yeah.
Had to be a certain age. And we became close friends. I have a lot of good stories. And all positive though with him.
Now, did he ask you about you? Did he care? I mean, because I feel like so many people when you meet Elvis, you're just going to ask him everything about him.
Yeah.
Did he care about what your background was?
Yeah, he was curious about things, about my background, the show business thing, and he loved James Dean. That was his idol. And I had a quick story. He had fooled me. He pulled a trick on me. Elvis did, and he didn't like it on himself, but he pulled it. When I flipped him quietly, we were rehearsing. I thought he hit his head and died, And I'm thinking, oh my God. Then he said, oh, I got your little speckled pup, which they put in the film. And he told people that. Anyway, so I said, I got to get back at him somewhere. Well, my daddy was in show business all his life, and he was a singer and so forth. And it was 1955. I was 15. I got my age. And my daddy went over. We lived in Hollywood. My dad went over to Warner Brothers to see the Giant set, movie Giant.
I love Giant.
Chill Wills was one of his best friends.
Wow.
And
what a movie.
Yeah, what a movie. And of course,
George Stevens.
Exactly, Taylor. So I get a call, and I said hello, and Daddy says from Texas. He was from Texas, so I said Daddy, and he said someone wants to talk to you, and I said okay. I'll never forget this. And the man on the other end said, is this Cynthia? I said, yes. He said, well, this is James Dean.
Wow.
He said, I heard it was your birthday. Is that right? And I went, yes. He said, well, your daddy told me it was, so happy birthday. And then he said, here's your daddy. Give the phone back. And then 2 weeks later, he was gone.
Oh, my
Now,
gosh.
I told the story. It took about 30 seconds conversation. But when I told to get back at Elvis for what he made me go through, I made this last an hour.
Yeah.
I said, oh, well, we talked about this, we talked about that. He said, you did? He was like on the edge.
But the funny thing is, now, how many thousands of people tell that story about their time that they met, saw Elvis,
Yeah,
He's that guy.
He's that guy. And we'd be at a restaurant. My husband would say, you might be the only one in this whole room that knew Elvis. Is part of history because of him.
Yeah.
Not because of me, but because of him. So that's true. That's true. Just fate. It was just, happened. And after that, I did some more work. And he said, honey, you come up to see me in Vegas, when I start touring. I said, sure, I will. And I never did because I went on with my life. We kept in touch by phone.
Yeah.
And I never did. But that's the gist of it. Do things now because, we're not promised tomorrow.
Yeah. And time moves on.
Time moves on. And so it's my story. And there's a big chapter in my book about Elvis. And, of course, all the other people, that I met and so forth and in the business. So
I had a funny Elvis story. I went up to meet Noel Blanc, who is Mel Blanc's son and lives in Mel's house up in Big Bear where Mel was the honorary mayor. And he tells me a story of how one day the phone rang and the voice on the other end says, is Mel there? This is Elvis Presley. And Mel said, yeah, right, and hung up. He calls back. He says, Mel, now this is Elvis. I want to come meet you. You're a hero of mine. So he says, well, if this is really Elvis, show up at this address. And he says, 30 minutes later, there's a car out front, and there comes Elvis. And he says, we end up going out. They go out on Mel's boat, which had a Corvette engine, and they're out racing. And he tells them, don't race it fast, Elvis. We'll get in trouble. He said, well, next thing you know, Elvis is flying up there. He goes, when we see another boat coming towards us, it turns out to be Gene Autry. So he goes, if you can imagine, Gene Autry, Mel Blanc, and Elvis Presley sitting in two boats. And Noel said, I was with them. So I'm just going, what is this?
What a story.
Yeah, and this is just one day of his 2 weeks filming a movie on location. The guy didn't take a break.
No,
he was always looking for fun.
He didn't. And he helped me find my cat, too, because I'm a big animal advocate. And I had cats at the time, so we lived in separate rooms in the motel, and there was in the woods. So
did he stay in the motel? I didn't know if he'd have his own house or
someplace else.
Oh, okay.
We all stayed in the motel. So I would see the stray cat, and I asked the manager. I said, "It doesn't belong to anybody." I said, "Well, then can I have it?" Sure, you can catch it. So I told Elvis that he was out traipsing and was looking for my cat. And some of the guys, some of my Memphis Mafia were doing that, and they were looking for my cat. I did bring it on. He did catch it. So Elvis was my hero with the cats. You couldn't get better than that.
That's awesome.
He was just wonderful. He was. he was a good soul. I've nothing but nice. Not perfect, of course.
Yeah, but you've worked with a lot of people on a lot of
James
sets.
Stewart, and just yeah, I've worked with a lot.
Where would he rank as far as your favorites?
Oh, he's by far.
That says a lot. Were you an Elvis fan before?
I was in 1955. The first song I heard him do was Heartbreak Hotel on Sunset. I used to go to you have to go into a room and play the records. This is 1955, 56. I said, wow, Elvis, what a strange name. But I was in love, not knowing, 1963 we filmed. So not too long after that, I got to know him, work with him, and became a friend, It was wonderful. It's the best.
Do you like the movie when you watch it now, or is it, because I was friends with Shelley Winters, and if I would try and turn on something that wasn't one of her favorite works, she'd say, this is too cheesy, I can't watch this is too kiddie,
Well, the thing is, the movies were pretty much the same. There were a few that were really he was a better actor than the movies would afford him to be.
Yeah.
And we all know that. But it made money, and it made people happy, and it still does. And I never saw him, be grumpy about the movies, or I should be doing something else. He wanted to do other things, but that didn't happen. But I always thought that it was his type of movie, and you had the girls singing, and he was singing.
Yeah.
And that's all you need,
And between you having your own show
Right.
and being Margie and then being known for this movie, how often would you say, like, you get recognized from this movie as opposed to that, or which one do you?
I'm in the Elvis world.
Oh,
I'm
so
big in the Elvis world, which I'm grateful for because I get to travel. I meet a lot
be part of the Graceland
Elvis
stuff.
fans are the best, and I mean that.
They are.
I feel like I'm home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And some little ones, older ones, and they're very kind. And you just, when you're with your kind, someone you like,
Yeah.
you feel comfortable. And I do that, like I said, all over. And I'm still doing it. So, and I still hope to do it in the future. I have some things coming up possibly about that. I don't particularly want to act anymore. I've been there, done that, and I can't remember lines anymore. I get to talk on stage, and I can talk a lot. What we're doing, but to actually learn lines and do a whole thing, and I'm done that. I'm moved to that now.
Well, you've made your mark, that's for sure. It's an amazing story that you have.
Thank
And I had no idea that Ginger Rogers was your stepmother, and I think I've
No,
been
she
in
wasn't
her.
My stepmother wasn't born yet. She was 17, and my dad was a few years older. And he
Oh,
met
it was
her-
before.
Yeah.
Oh.
She wasn't Ginger Rogers.
Wow.
My dad was here, and Ginger was here. My dad had a radio show. He was a singer. Like I said, he roomed with Bob Hope, and he was good friends with Jackie Gleason, Milton Berle, and all those guys. And so I have a letter from Ginger to my aunt in Milwaukee. My dad's sister used to be in show business with my daddy, and said that, I'm paraphrasing, Jack bought me a roadster, and we're going to Hollywood. We hope we make it in Hollywood. It was 1928, 29. And my dad had a little bit of a drinking problem, so that didn't help his career, but he was a good man. And so they only married about 2 or 3 years. So I have that letter that said, I love Ginger.
That's
She
so
and my
cool.
aunt were good friends because of that. I met her when I was doing the pilot of Margie, and she was doing a pilot of 20th Century Fox. I was under contract, and she was there in the wardrobe department. Wardrobe department's looking for me.
That had to feel kind of strange for you,
Yeah.
because
So I saw her, and I said, oh my God, that's Ginger Rogers. I'm going to have to say something. Well, sometimes when you're excited, you say some really stupid stuff.
yeah.
So I went up to her, and I said, Miss Rogers? And she says, yes. I said, my name is Cynthia Pepper. I believe you know my father. She was married to him. Of course she knew. And she said, and I remember this too. She said, oh, how is the dear boy? Gave me a hug, and I said, he's fine. She had married, 4 or 5 times after that.
Yeah.
But we went to lunch a number of times at the commissary after that. And then she's
Did she ever want to see him again,
No, they
or
never said
that
anything.
chapter was closed?
Yeah, he was married to someone else for a short time, then married to my mother the longest, over 40 years, till he passed. She passed.
Well, you wrote a book. Would you like to promote your book and
Yes.
how people can get it, and what maybe something interesting in the book that they will find out about you?
Well, it's called Pigtails because I wore pigtails as a kid, and then Margie wore pigtails as a teenager in the show Margie, and I love the 20s. Pigtails, Presley, and Pepper. And it starts out basically, I wanted to write like I was talking to someone, And it's not an Elvis book. Too many people have done that, and I have nothing but good things to say about him. But I wanted the whole, like a memoir, like my life.
Yeah.
And because I met a lot of people, and nothing's perfect. We had problems. Who doesn't? Dysfunctional at times with the drinking and everything. But and I had a sister that we weren't very close, but they're all gone. I feel like an orphan sometimes. I have one son who's.
But now you have the Elvis community that's,
I've met so many people. I met my friend who co-wrote it in an Elvis festival in Toronto.
It's amazing.
And we become like family, he and his wife and I. And it's opened a whole new
That's
world.
the crazy part of Hollywood people don't think of, They know you from maybe a TV show or something. They don't think about 10 years, you will always be known as that person, and someone will always come up to you and say, you made an impact on my life. So it's got to feel great.
There was one guy I was working at a thing called Elvis-orama in Vegas, just signing autographs. There was a museum, and this guy came up with his wife, and they had a little show, and he said, this is in early 2000s, and he said, I'm with my wife, I don't like Elvis, and she wanted to see this guy, sing, an impersonator. We call it ETA. And I said, okay. So he came, he said, I'll just stay here and talk for a minute. I said, okay. So I said, why don't you like, well, no, you don't have to like him, But he went on and on. And I said, really? So I told him how I felt. And then when I saw the guy, and he said that he was a real human being.
Yeah.
And so he came back, he said, and I get tears, I want to thank you. I said, what for? He said, it opened my eyes. I said, you don't have to like somebody, but I like him now. I
Yeah.
That he was real. And I said, yeah, he was.
That's amazing.
And it just like that. And people said, that Elvis music has lifted them up when they were in the
Yeah.
depression and all that kind of thing. And it goes on and on. It still does.
I have a similar story. I took a friend of mine who's a big history buff. We were passing through Memphis. It happens to be 4th of July. And I said, we have to stop and stay here so we can see what Graceland looks like tonight with like the fireworks and everything. And he said, I'm not a big Elvis guy. And we went out there at night and we watched it all. And we were walking back to the guest house at Graceland. He says, I get it now.
Yeah.
I totally get it now.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all. Thank you for being you and sharing these stories and keeping your memory alive, your history and the things that people may not know. They may not have ever seen Margie, but now they can go find it because they love you. And
I have a record out too.
Oh, really?
With the 20th Century Fox Orchestra. I think it was Lionel Newman. The Newman music. When I did Margie, and I did a couple of fairs, and it's called Baby Blues and Tommy. And I have a song, my dad could sing. I mean, he sang with Garland and all that.
Wow.
Crosby and all these people. And
do you want to give his name by any chance?
So my daddy was Jack Pepper.
Okay.
And there's some on YouTube when he's 28 years old or something like that, and he's singing with the ukulele. And he was a little guy then, and I said, that's my daddy, 1928 or something, or he was 28 years old, whatever. And it was amazing to see that. You can get on YouTube, Jack Pepper. He did a lot of things. Bob Hope was a dear friend of his. Put he and a lot of his old cronies in his NBC specials in LA. And I'd go visit. I met Lucille Ball there. I met Lee Marvin there and Milton Berle. And just stories. It's in my, most of it's in my book.
Good, then people can go buy it.
Good, Bad. Yeah, it's called The Good, Bad, and what is it? Good, Bad, Not Too Ugly book. But it's called Pigtails, Presley, and Pepper, and you get it on Amazon. And if you ever out at one of these things, and if you do buy it, and I'll sign it, of course. And I bring them to my festivals and stuff. And it's about 300 pages, so it took about 2.5 years. Someone said, you should write, well, everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah, they do.
I said, okay, so my friend Victor and I started talking about it. He said, I'll help you with it. And we had no deadline, so we did it. And
yeah.
It's a catharsis. I said, I want to start at the beginning. There's a thread of Elvis through my whole life with friends and who I worked with, and I found that out.
That's interesting.
So it's people seem to like it. So it's like you were talking to me, and I said that's what I wanted.
I can't wait to get the book myself now.
Thank you. I'll have it this weekend.
I'll get it tomorrow. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank
this
you,
was
George.
a blast.
Thank you so much.